No risk it, no biscuit.
Arizona Cardinals fans, do you see red? Are you part of the Red Sea? Then you are listening to the show for you. A podcast for Cardinals fans, by Cardinals fans, with outsider and insider perspectives. It's time to rise up and see red. Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. We're recording a day later than normal because of life stuff that's going on. I'm the host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL Wire site for the Arizona Cardinals. My co-host is Seth Cox, the managing editor of RevengeOfTheBirds.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site, and also the host of the NFL Draft Breakdown podcast. Seth, welcome back to Arizona as you just finished up a big life event, and now you're back home to watch the Cardinals fade off into oblivion as they are now eliminated from the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of what we talked about. What was going to happen? What was going to become of the overall season? How long could they maintain? And we got our answer, and it's over. It's done with. It's it's one of those situations where it's over. The season is not over. There's two wonderful games left that I'm sure our sites are going to be very barren over the next couple weeks as the season kind of comes to an end, but not for lack of information from us, but I think a lot of the fans are going to enjoy the holidays more than you and I will.
It's very, very possible, considering the Cardinals-Titans game, which ended up being quite the game. There were lots and lots of empty seats, but regardless of that, the Cardinals, they had faint playoff hopes going into this last weekend against the Washington Redskins. They were in a situation where they had to win out, and then they needed help. And they needed the Seahawks to lose, they needed the Falcons to lose, and they needed them to keep losing. And then they needed, after that, the other teams that were in the race could only win one more game. Now, Cardinals didn't do their job, so they lose to the Washington Redskins 20-15. We're going to talk briefly about that. Being that we're now recording on a Wednesday, it'll be Thursday before this is posted. Don't need to dwell so much on that, but they lose 20-15. They take 80,000 trips to the red zone, don't cash in a single one, end up with 5 Phil Dawson field goals, and they lose 20-15 basically because the defense was put in bad situations. First opening drive of the game, Blaine Gabbert gets sacked and fumbled, and Washington takes over inside their own 10. They score a touchdown. That ends up being the difference. Blaine Gabbert throws an interception in one of the red zone trips, takes points off the board there, and what you have is a 20-15 loss. They lose, they're eliminated. But even if they win, and even their record is 7-7 because the Atlanta Falcons ultimately won on Monday night, even with the Cardinals win, they still would have been eliminated. So we would still be in the situation that we are in right now. Only we're talking about a win and elimination. The Cardinals didn't take care of business. They did, however, get some solid individual performances. The running game, again, so that's now, I believe, 4 games in a row of 100 yards on the ground as a team after they were just atrocious. And the surprising part, they did it with Will Holden at left tackle. Kerwin Williams rushed for a bunch of yards, 60-something yards. They ran for almost 150 as a team. Elijah Penny came in after Kerwin got hurt, rushed for 45 yards. Chandler Jones picked up another sack. They held the Redskins to 31 yards rushing. In fact, they held them to just over 200 yards of offense. This was a game where the Cardinals overall outplayed the Redskins and should have won that game and were the better team on the field, but they couldn't cash in third down or in the red zone. They were 0 for 6 in the red zone. They were 4 of 21 on third down. They had 83 snaps on offense to 40-something for the Redskins. And just overall, it was one of those games where you lament things, and it ended up leading to what we're going to be talking about. Among the things we're going to be talking about on this show this evening or this afternoon that you're listening to it is the return to the starting lineup of Drew Stanton. Blaine Gabbert goes to the bench, and we're going to talk about what some of the things that Arians talked about. But Drew Stanton will start for the Arizona Cardinals this week against the New York Giants. The Pro Bowl was announced. 4 Cardinals players make the Pro Bowl, and perhaps a surprising 2 are alternates. We're also going to go into some of the things that we're going to be dealing with as well. We'll talk about some of the injuries. Cardinals, again, ravaged with injuries, and look ahead to the Giants game. So that's what's coming up on this edition of the Rise Up Sea Red podcast. And before we get started, of course, we want to make sure you guys know about Harry's.com, a friend of the show, supporting our show. And if you guys could support Harry's, you won't regret it, for one, because I've told you about their blades. Wonderful close shave, great shave for the face. I've got sensitive skin and everything, and it feels great. Super, super cheap too. It's what's a great part. It's a great price for high quality blades. And I've got my new blades coming in. They'll be here in a couple of days, and I can't wait to continue using those. I told you before, I was using the electric razor before because I didn't want to go with the crappy disposables, the super expensive, nicer stuff. You get the quality of the nicer blades for half the cost. It's fantastic. 3 million guys have already switched. If you want to switch with me already, it'd be fantastic. And we've got a special offer for you, our listeners, harrys.com/cred, and you're going to get the trial shave set for free. Just pay for the shipping, $3. So you get what you get in that free trial offer. It's a $13 value so that you get for free. Cover the $3 for shipping. You get the razor handle. You get the blade. You get the razor head. It's got 5 precision engineered blades. You get the rich shaving gel, and you get a travel blade cover. So get on over. So go to harrys.com/cred right now. It's harrys.com/cred and get yourself, try it out. You won't regret it, and you'll want to keep using it. I mean, unless you're Seth and you've got the big old beard going on. So let's talk about the switch to Drew Stanton. Does it surprise you, first and foremost? So Arians, after the game, says they're going to stay with Gabbert. Then on Monday, he comes out and said, we're going to make a change. Drew Stanton's the guy now. Did it surprise you?
Well, it didn't surprise me, but that's because I've known, what Drew Gabbert, Blaine Stanton, whatever, what these guys are, and they're the same player. So now you're going to go back to a guy in Stanton who, the NFL's got plenty of film on, but it's been, 5 weeks, 6 weeks since he's played a game. So why not? I mean, it's an easy switch. There's nothing really to it, and you can, because it's not something that Jess and I talk about too much. Draft rumors I get information about, but as far as locker room morale and things like that, Jess and I steer clear of that pretty much all the time. But I do wonder if Arians could really put Gabbert back out there, as they are now at 10 quarters played. So that's 2.5 whole football games without a touchdown. And you talked about it in the opener. It's not all Gabbert, never is all one player, but that dude sure does seem to find opportune times to kind of pee down his leg in the pocket or make bad decisions. And it's kind of I say they're basically the same player, but it's funny because I think when you look at Gabbert, he's more of a high variance player. You see the 6 touchdowns and then the 6 interceptions. Whereas you look at Drew Stanton, I think he had 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions this year, but one of those interceptions was in that half relief appearance in London where he basically was just asked to throw the ball around as much as possible to try to make something happen. Starter, I think he's at 3-1 this year. I mean, Stanton, is a guy that, and you've talked about this, Stanton is a guy that is overly cautious with the ball, whereas I think Gabbert was, playing kind of freewheeling and trying to make plays happen and take chances. Maybe for a worse part, but in the end, what do you think? Could Arians go into that locker room after 2.5 games of no touchdowns and say Blaine's still the guy? Like, I don't think it's a personal thing, but I think it gets to a point where the defense is like, come on, like, give us a chance.
And for me, it comes down to consistency. Arians said from the beginning, the reason why Gabbert was playing was because Stanton wasn't 100%. He wasn't able to be Drew Stanton after that Seattle game. As much as he wanted to play, Stanton couldn't do it. He was going to be limited in his play. He could have played at any point of this, and he made sure to come out and said that Stanton is much healthier now. He can run around like he did, so there's no worry. And Stanton said there's still some improving he's got to do, but if there's anything that it does, it shows Bruce Arians' consistency in the message. They wanted to see what Gabbert had. They had opportunities that they lost, and it wasn't all on Gabbert. It was partly on Gabbert, but when you have a guy in the locker room, and you've got a guy in the locker room who they already respect and who is healthy now, they had to go back. They had to go back to Stanton because what is always the case, the message that Arians consistently says is, I'm going to play the guys that give us the best opportunity to win. And in this case, after what we've seen from Blaine Gabbert the last couple of weeks, his numbers his performances have consistently decreased. They've regressed a little bit every single week. And, a healthy Stanton is the better option against the Giants. He is. And I thought they should have gone back to Stanton when he was healthy. I thought that would eventually happen.
And I think you kind of hit it on the head. Like, there's definitely a factor to this where Arians doesn't have to say Gabbert sucked. He can say Drew's healthy, and that was always the plan. And that's definitely coach speak. I mean, but that's what Arians is kind of famous for.
Well, and here's the part about this whole situation that I find hilarious. I find it just – we've been talking about Blaine Gabbert even back to the preseason, and the way everyone has talked about Blaine Gabbert is like he's a second-year player. This is the quote. I've got the quote here from Bruce Arians when he talked on Monday when they made the say. He says, it's hard. I think Blaine is a player. I really do. I think he has a great future. Some of those things he's experiencing for the first time, and it's not a lack of talent. It's just a lack of experience in this offense at that time. Like, he says the same thing about Evan Boehm.
Right. And that's what has been my biggest criticism of all of this. That has been what has been my pet peeve of all of this. This is what has been my biggest issue with all of this, is that we are not treating Gabbert and Stanton to the same standards. And you might say, well, Stanton's been in the offense for 5 years. Okay. Is he worse? Because he's not. I mean, that's just, you can't say that he is. He does it. He's never thrown as many interceptions in one season. He's always taking care of the ball better. Yeah, he's not an accurate passer. That's fine. That's why he's not an NFL starter. I mean, that's the reality of the whole thing, is that he's not an NFL starter because he's not an accurate passer. If he was, if he was, guess who's the quarterback in 2015 after for the second time in his career with a knee injury? Guess who's the starter in 2016 and 2017? It's Drew Stanton. Like, if Drew Stanton was a viable option to be a starter, he would be, but he's not. He's a backup quarterback. And so you're going to get out of Stanton. You can say, well, you can get better. Well, can you? Because it's been proven now that Ryan Lindley can't do it, that Logan Thomas can't do it, and now Blaine Gabbert can't do it. Matt Barkley couldn't do it. Like, none of these guys can do it. So lament, be frustrated, get angry out of them going back to Drew Stanton, and it doesn't make sense. It makes sense because you've seen as much as you're going to see from Gabbert. And you've got numbers that you're going to bring up that are fantastic, and I think paint the picture better than what you and I have said for.
Well, yes. The one thing I want to point is if we look at this 5-game window that we've been looking at for Gabbert, and I'm going to get to the stats in just a second, but they had really nothing to lose going with Gabbert. If we look back at those games, those 5 games, they go 2-3. If Stanton's plays, the 2 games that they win, they beat Jacksonville, they beat Tennessee, fantastic. Their losses, the first of those 2 losses, they lose to Houston, 31-21. They lose to the Rams, 32-16, and then they lose to Washington. Let's be honest. If Drew Stanton starts those games instead, there is one game that makes a difference. What's the one game? It's the game this last weekend, because Stanton doesn't throw the red zone interception, and so they get at least 3 more points. And 2, they get at least 1 touchdown out of that. They down at the end of the game when DJ Foster has Blaine Gabbert chucks a fastball that hits Foster's helmet before he turns around, or it's batted down. The 6'4" Blaine Gabbert has his pass batted down at the line of scrimmage when he's got DJ. He's got to drop it in there. He's wide open. Stanton converts on at least one of those. So Stanton is 1 better. And the Cardinals are 7-7. He's 3-2 in that time period, as opposed to the 2-3 when they're 6-8. There's not much difference. But no, getting to the stats on Blaine Gabbert, if in 5 games we've learned something. This is actually I didn't find these numbers myself. I was shown them from John Gabador at Arizona Sports 98.7, and he talked about it on the radio here locally. And so I pulled up, and here's what we have. Blaine Gabbert in 5 games with the Arizona Cardinals has almost mirrored perfectly his career numbers. So he's completed 55.6% of his passes for the Cardinals. In his 7 years or 6.5 years, in his 7th season, he's completed 55.9. This year, for the Cardinals, 6 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, almost a perfect even 1-1. In his career, 44 touchdowns, 43 interceptions, almost perfect. He has a 3.5% interception rate with the Cardinals, 3.1 for his career. His passer rating with Arizona is 71.9. His career is 71.5. So we've seen what Gabbert is, and Gabbert is what he's always been. Now, if we want to break it down a little bit more, so we see this. In his 3 years in Jacksonville, he was bad. He is in 5 games better than the Jacksonville Gabbert, which is the Lawls Gabbert version that we saw. And if you look at the big picture of what he was in San Francisco, he's not quite as good as he was there overall. And the testament, because there was a stretch of time when there was a stretch of games in which Gabbert played well, and that's what got him kind of the opportunity. So the 5-game thing, the samples that we saw from Gabbert with the Cardinals is almost exactly like the other 65 games that he's played in his career, or the other 40 games that he's played in his career. So we know what Gabbert is. Knowing that, though, Seth, what do you think is the future for him here? Is he a guy that you would bring back? And I think his return is actually critical, depending on a couple of things. Well, let me hear tell the listeners what you think.
I've said kind of all along, my thought process has been that you just move Gabbert into the Stanton role.
And
you don't necessarily look at him as, and people are going to get upset about this, but I don't really care. You don't even really want to look at him as a bridge guy. You want to look at him as the backup to the bridge guy. So, you and I have talked about this quite a bit. Hopefully that's Carson Palmer. I mean, it's been kind of proven at this point that Palmer is 100% still the best option at quarterback for this team. We can lament other things. We can talk about Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes. We can talk about going back, Derek Carr. We can talk about everybody else that they haven't drafted, Dak Prescott. But in options that are realistic, Carson Palmer is the best option for this team in 2018. And I'm pretty sure you agree, Blaine Gabbert is probably the best option to be the immediate backup quarterback, with, hopefully, fingers crossed, a talented quarterback that is this year and comes in and sits behind Palmer and Gabbert, and then in, God forbid, middle of 2018, but hopefully 2019, that quarterback takes over and begins to kind of carry the load. And then you still have Gabbert there to be the, veteran.
And for me, it's dependent on two things. One, does Bruce Arians return in 2018? And two, do they decide to move on from Drew Stanton? Now, if Drew Stanton is going to be back next year, there's no need for Blaine Gabbert. But I look at Blaine Gabbert in this situation, especially we're going through a quarterback transition. Perhaps Arians comes back next year. That means, if Palmer retires and they move on from Stanton, then Gabbert's a free agent. Matt Barkley's. You have zero players on the roster at the position who know the system, or at least know the system partly. So we go back to 2013. The first thing that the Cardinals do, the first free agent move, was to sign Drew Stanton, who had been a backup for Arians in Indy and had been in that offense 1 year. And they bring him in. We think maybe he becomes a star. What do? They trade for Carson Palmer. And Stanton then immediately becomes the knowledgeable, and that's what they praised him for, was his knowledge of the offense and his ability to see things. And so Gabbert, now with 1 year under his belt, now we know we're going to fight if you tell me that Matt Barkley's a better option than Blaine Gabbert. So you either go with Matt Barkley. No, you don't. Don't do that. Or Blaine Gabbert. Like I've always said, as the guy that was number 3 on the roster, Blaine Gabbert's great, because if you look at Ryan Lindley, Logan Thomas, Matt Barkley, Zach Dysert, clearly Gabbert is better. But so you bring Gabbert back. He's got a year under the system. He's not going to be the starter. The Cardinals are either going to bring back Palmer, and they're going to draft a guy, and I think that's the perfect scenario. Palmer comes back as a starter because he's the best option you have. Gabbert is the backup that can be there, and you sign Gabbert to a 3-year deal, because then he bridges after Palmer and doesn't necessarily go into the starter role, because ideally they draft a guy in 2018 who can be the starter in 2019, and Gabbert is still the backup. Or you sign Gabbert again, he's the backup, and you acquire a veteran quarterback like they did in Palmer in 2013, and Gabbert is still the Drew Stanton, only he's about the age that Drew Stanton was when he was here. And he does have a higher ceiling. And what we have seen, that if as a starter, he can help you win games. He can. He's just not going to do it for an extended period of time, because you will eventually see this high ceiling but pedestrian playing quarterback. So if Arians is back, I think Gabbert has to come back. And I think it would be wise for the quarterback progression.
Yeah, and I'm with you 100%. I think it makes sense. I think it protects kind of what you want to do, and allows you to take that progression slowly. Probably not the right word, but you're able to bring in a guy and you don't have to worry quite as much. And that's honestly the biggest thing. You just don't want to worry. You don't want to get into a situation where, Deshaun Watson was fantastic, but you really don't want that situation where you're saying, oh man, Blaine Gabbert sucks. let's throw our rookie quarterback in there now. So that's, I think that's where they're at right now. I think they're at a point where they want to see what they have, know what they have in Palmer. They know what they have in Gabbert. So now all of a sudden you bring in a rookie and you don't have to worry about that immediacy of playing. Carson Palmer can stop being hit 42 times a game.
4 Cardinals players were named to the Pro Bowl. 2 are surprise alternates. We'll talk about if they deserve to. We're going to talk about if the league got it right. That's coming on this on Rise Up See Red.
Hey, sports fans, football season's here, and it's time to get in on the action with MyBookie. MyBookie is the industry-leading sports betting website that offers real Vegas odds on football, baseball, and all your favorite sporting events. You can take a side, the total, or even fantasy points props. MyBookie lets you bet online and win big. Did the game already kick off? Don't sweat it. MyBookie has in-game live betting on every major league and event, even esports. There's no better time to join MyBookie than today. Go to MyBookie to open an account and start winning. Use promo code CHAMPION when you register for your account and get a 100% sign-up bonus up to $1,000 on your first deposit. Bet today. Visit MyBookie's website or call 844-866-2387. That's 844-866-2387. Check them out today and use promo code CHAMPION for a 100% bonus. Terms and conditions apply for entertainment purposes only. Void where prohibited.
We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast. We're going to talk Pro Bowl. Pro Bowl. 4 Cardinals named to the Pro Bowl. And for me, it was perfect. No controversy, no snubs. The 4 players who on the Cardinals deserved it are the 4 Cardinals that make it. Larry Fitzgerald, Patrick Peterson, Chandler Jones, and Budda Baker as a special teams player. No surprise at all. It's what I expected. It's what I believed would happen. It's kind of you knew that Fitzgerald and Peterson were going to make it. And based on the voting, the fact that Chandler Jones is having a fantastic year, leading the league in sacks, leading the league in tackles for loss. So he's elite against the run. He's elite against as a pass rusher. You knew, and he was the top vote getter at his position. You knew he was going to get in. Budda Baker, the same thing, having a great year in special teams. Led the NFL, not just the NFC, but the NFL in special teams votes. So you had to figure he had the inside track. Any surprises for you in terms of those 4 players? Anything? I mean, is there anything that needs to be said about these players and the fact of the seasons that they had?
No, I don't think so. I think, I mean, I am honestly surprised about Baker being basically starters. I don't really follow the Pro Bowl as how they do the game anymore, but it used to be, the starters were the ones voted in. I'm not sure. I don't think they do that anymore, but I could be wrong.
No, it's a mix. The ones that get selected to the Pro Bowl are based on fan vote, player vote, coach vote, and then they're just named to it. And I don't think they even name starters. They just start. I'm not sure. They're just named Pro Bowlers and then they play.
But I mean, I mean, it's kind of surprising that Chandler Jones and Budda Baker were the top vote getters at their respective positions, right? I mean, how often does it? Not because they don't deserve it, but how often does it happen that Arizona Cardinals players, especially not Larry Fitzgerald or Patrick Peterson or Tyrann Mathieu players, are noticed I think it's absolutely phenomenal, because I've said over the last month that I think it's kind of a travesty at this point that Chandler Jones isn't talked about more as the defensive player of the year in the NFL.
He should be. Most certainly should be. Now, I'm going to take that. I'm not surprised about Chandler Jones if for any reason more than this. He's listed as an outside linebacker, and if you look at the NFC, are there any other top of the line 3-4 edge rushing outside linebackers? The good ones are all 4-3 defensive ends, and therefore getting votes as defensive ends.
Yeah, and you're right about that. In Robert Quinn, I guess he's a 3-4 outside linebacker now, but he's kind of back. Yeah, he's taken a step back as that pass rushing dynamo that he was.
DeMarcus Lawrence, defensive end. Everson Griffin, defensive end. All these top stack guys, the guys that get voted in, they're defensive ends. And so Chandler Jones benefits for being one of the 3-4 back. I mean, Ryan Kerrigan, Preston Smith. Chandler Jones has a following on the East Coast and if you look at the vote getting, Von Miller in the AFC was the top vote getter with almost 250,000 votes. Chandler Jones led it in the NFC with 171,000 votes, which is just a few more votes than what kicker Greg Zuerlein got.
Yeah, and when you look at the overall voting of Baker, I think he's an exciting name. He was big coming out of college. People that made sense. Whereas when you look at he was kind of always he was the voted in guy.
Well, it was for the NFC, it was Bethel for a long time, or it was Lorenzo Alexander. In the AFC, you've got Matthew Slater.
Right, and those are but that's my point, is that those guys are always reputation guys.
Yeah.
Right? You never really see a new guy get in there. And so for Baker to do it, not only, be a new guy, but as a rookie, I think that speaks to his popularity as a player, speaks to the popularity of him as a college athlete, and then, carrying it over to the Cardinals. And that's, it's dumb to say, but their Q rating has gotten a lot better recently. Obviously winning helps that, but even in the losing seasons, you look at it, Johnson was roundly drafted number 1 in a number of fantasy leagues. Fitz is Fitz. He's one of those kind of all-timers that you just are fortunate to have. But then you have Patrick Peterson, who has a legion of fans that are not Arizona Cardinals fans. You have Chandler Jones, who I think his lines, being John Jones's brother and those things, I think that all helps. But he has a big Q rating. Obviously, Tyrann Mathieu, much like Peterson, a huge star outside of being an Arizona Cardinal. He's a huge star in the football world. And now, you kind of add Budda Baker to that. And so it's cool to see that, because for so many years it was Aeneas Williams, and every once in a while you got a guy like Seth Joyner in there, or Eric Swan in there, or and even when you got good players like Simeon Rice, they couldn't wait to leave Arizona. And now you have a guy like Patrick Peterson, who's 7 for 7, and that's a historic thing. No defensive player in the history of the NFL has ever made 7 Pro Bowls in a row from his rookie season to his 7th season. That is literally history making stuff. It's fantastic. And does Peterson deserve it as a player on the field? Yes, absolutely. But you look at his popularity amongst fans as well, and that's it's just it's fun to be in this era of the Cardinals, because let's be honest, a 7-9 Arizona Cardinals team, even probably 10 years ago, at the beginning of the Ken Whisenhunt era, maybe Fitz was getting in the Pro Bowl, maybe
Fitz might get in, and Adrian Wilson would, because he ended up with, as the saying goes, for the Pro Bowl, you never get in the first time you deserve it, and you usually go to one more than you should. And that's where Adrian Wilson was towards the end.
And so, but you look at that. I mean, those 7-9 teams for the Cardinals. Yeah, you're right. Like you got an Adrian Wilson and you got an Emmitt Smith. I don't know if he made a Pro Bowl, but those were the guys you got in. Like you didn't have 4 players and you didn't have 2 top vote getters. Like even if you ran a 3-4 defense at that time and the outside linebacker thing, and you guess what? They weren't going to be an Arizona Cardinal player. I can promise you that. And so, just the change in the Q rating for the team is important.
And here's for me, perhaps is the most surprising thing. It is not the 4 players who made it. I predicted those would be the 4 Pro Bowlers, and it in a team that is very mediocre, the fact that they have 4 Pro Bowlers compared to the Philadelphia Eagles, who have been the class of the NFC, have 6. It tells you something about the talent or where the Cardinals actually probably should be in terms of the standing. But the surprise for me was to see the Pro Bowl alternates. Tyrann Mathieu and Adrian Peterson are Pro Bowl alternates. Tyrann Mathieu, I kind of get. What in the world, Adrian Peterson, who had exactly 2 good games, is a Pro Bowl alternate?
But again, you're talking about a portion of it being fan voting and a portion of it being player voting. And you go back to that Tampa game. And I think you wrote about it as well. I wrote about it. And the Twitter reaction a game about Adrian Peterson from players in the NFL. From other players in the NFL talking about Adrian Peterson in such a glowing way. I think there's this like good idol thing still that happens with him. These young studs, Alvin Kamara, Todd Gurley, you have Kareem Hunt, you have these just dynamic rookies, and you have these young running backs that are kind of taking over, but they still look up to Adrian Peterson. And so when you combine the kind of reminiscing of Adrian Peterson from the fans and then the kind of boyhood idolishness of Peterson, the player, for other players, when you see the NFL 100 every year, there's a lot of and I think the Pro Bowl is the same thing. You've got fans who, let's be honest, don't care about the games outside of maybe their team or their favorite players, and you have players that don't care about the games, the ones they play in, or the guys that they look up to, and I think Peterson still checks those 2 boxes off. I'm gonna guess if you looked at the breakdown, because they don't do the breakdowns anymore, but if you looked at the breakdown of it, Peterson, 95% of his votes came from fans and peers in the league. I'm gonna guess that probably close to no votes came from coaches.
Probably, and that's probably
other than maybe the Bucks.
Well, and here's the interesting thing: Tyrann Mathieu doesn't surprise me as much because he ended up 7th among safeties in fan voting, and I know he still has a level of reputation in the league, especially after his 2015 season. And to his credit, he's played better over the last few weeks.
He's been the biggest benefactor of Budda Baker. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the defense as a whole has gotten better, but the way it has allowed them to use, as opposed to what they were doing or asking him to do before, I think you can see the difference in his level of play. And maybe it's just a confidence in himself, or maybe it's just a confidence in his knees. I don't know what it is. But you can see a difference since Budda got on the field. Maybe it's a concern. Maybe it's like, holy crap, this kid's really good. He could take my, he could take my payday that I'm due, if not cut first 5 days after the new league year starts. So
yeah.
But yeah, and like I said, Tyrann's got that Q rating. I mean, he has a legion of fans so vast and wide that are not Arizona Cardinals fans at all. I mean, they're not. They're Tyrann Mathieu fans. They're LSU fans, but they're also Louisiana fans. They're also fans of him from high school, and so he's going to continue producing at a quality level. It doesn't even have to be a high level. At a quality level, he's going to continue to be be a Pro Bowl alternate, continue to be a guy that gets these kind of votes, because as long as he's on the field and producing, people love him.
And that makes sense. But it's still weird.
Oh, you're 100% right. If you were gonna ask me an alternate on Bethea, I think Bethea's quietly had a really nice season for the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, it would have been Tyvon Branch. I think you and I both would have said that hands down before the injury. But Bethea, I think, has been probably the only guy outside of Peterson and Jones that has, from game 1 to game 15 or 14, been consistent and then on the field and healthy. So, I mean, you've had flashes from, Tyvon, you've had flashes of excellence from Corey Peters, but you've had, a nice game from Carlos Dansby. But I mean, if you're going to rank defenders on the season for me, I think it's Jones, Peterson, and then Bethea has been their third best player on defense from game 1 to game 14.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we got some Pro Bowl talk in. Who is the Cardinals left that game with a whole bunch of injuries? Who's left to play against the Giants in week 16 and then even against the Seahawks in week 17? Who's left? And what can we expect against the Giants weekend? Right? That maybe. That's coming up next on Rise Up, See Red. We're back on Rise Up, See Red. The Cardinals just continue to get bit by the injury bug. And I'm beginning to think that whatever deal they made with whomever to have the 2015 they did has come at a high cost of injuries over the last couple years. We're already down the quarterback, a running back, left tackle, right tackle, left guard, starting safety, top sack guy from a year ago. Yeah. The Cardinals opened the week of their... No big deal. Yeah, right. And then they lost their backup quarterback too. So to have fun with that. But they suffered more injuries. And it looks like their offensive line got through the game okay. But Kerwin Williams now got hurt. Carlos Dansby got hurt. Josh Bynes got hurt. Who else got hurt? Antoine Bethea got hurt. Troy Nicholas got hurt. They had 12 players. Now, 2 of them were that day off. So they had 10 players miss practice on Wednesday. 10 of them because of injury. What can we say about this? And it just seems absurd at this point.
It does, and it's one of those things, like, people have been like, oh, well, look at Washington and their IR thing, and it's probably just as bad as the Cardinals. But you look at the names or the positions, and like you said, you're talking about 3/5 of your offensive line. You didn't even really mention John Brown, not that he's on IR, or maybe he is and nobody knows it, but he was again supposed to be your number 2 wide receiver. And you've gotten virtually nothing from him this season. You look at your top quarterback. This isn't a case of the Ezekiel Elliott and then being able to plug in Alfred Morris. This is a case of the Steelers losing Le'Veon Bell and having nobody. I mean, that's the importance of David Johnson on this offense, and you can go back and talk about poor planning or preparation, or maybe you shouldn't have relied on 80% of your offense coming from one player. Neither here nor there. It's the impact of who it was, and then you hit on it. We were already concerned about Marcus Golden and Chandler Jones. I mean, that I think you and I expressed that there's viable and valid concern about what would happen now that they were the only guys that could rush the passer. And then you lose that guy who had, I mean, to be fair, hadn't had a big impact year, but he was having his best impact game, ironically enough, when he gets injured against San Francisco. And so when you look at it, you look at the scope of who they lost, and can you blame this season on injuries? I think you can to an extent, but I think it's also what we've talked about before. I mean, look at the poor Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, maybe I don't know. Maybe their fans are that bad that never let them have nice things. I've never had a ton of bad interaction with Philly Eagle fans, but what do I know? But you're talking about, and I wrote about this last week, and then I wrote about it again today, or Tuesday on or Wednesday. What day is it? Wednesday on Revenge of the Birds. But I wrote about it, and it's another year of what if. And that's frustrating because we've talked about this before. The Cardinals always seem to pick the wrong year to be good or to play well, right? Like 2013, bad year to be 10-6 team. Bad year. 2014, the biggest, I mean, outside of...
Bad year to have your quarterback go down. Because they were great.
If San Francisco pushes Santonio Holmes out of bounds, that's probably going to be the biggest what if of the last 20 years, maybe of the entire Arizona Cardinals franchise history after the Super Bowl game. But when you look at it, this season is going to go down as another what if, because what if the Cardinals had just been healthy this year? I don't know, but I mean, I'm going to bet on Carson Palmer or Drew Brees or Cam Newton or Matt Ryan if they get in over Case Keenum and Jared Goff. And that's no offense to those guys, but give me one of these quarterbacks that has done something before. These three guys that are going to be in over their head is the wrong verbiage to use, but they're definitely, it's going to be a brand new experience for Nick Foles. It's going to be a brand new experience for Case Keenum. It's going to be a brand new experience for Jared Goff. Like, those are going to be big games all of a sudden that they've never had to play in before in the NFL. Just look at it and go, man, what if the Cardinals could have stayed healthy this year? Maybe they're not a Super Bowl team, but man, the NFC is ripe for the picking this year, and they picked another bad year to have a bunch of injuries.
And even still, with all the injuries, they were sort of still in this up until about a week ago.
Right, and that's what's baffling is all those injuries, and they're still there, and so that's why it's such a what if. Like, I had buddies text me after the Wentz thing, and you never wish an injury on a guy, but you go, man, imagine if the Cardinals were healthy. Maybe they're in the same spot as the Seahawks, or maybe they're slightly better than the Seahawks, and they're at right now, and they're 9-5, and you're going, man, just get in the playoffs, and I like their chances because you got a gelled and is turned into a top 5 DVOA defense. The Football Outsider stat since week, I think it's 10 or 11, like a top 5 defense in the NFL. And then you have Carson Palmer and David Johnson. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it at this point. I mean, it's just one of those things, and I think it's a testament to the team. I think it's a testament to Arians. I know a lot of people. I do the Arians poll every week, and the first week it was 51-49 to keep Arians. After the Titans game, it was like 65-35 to keep Arians. And so it'll be interesting to see how this week's poll ends, because I'm going to guess it's going to be closer to 50-50 split. But the job Arians is doing, I think you have to commend, because he could have packed it up. I mean, he could have said, "The hell with this. I'm down Carson Palmer. I'm down David Johnson. I'm down," to be quite frank, the only 3 quality offensive linemen I have. My defense was complete garbage the first 8 weeks of the season. Like, it's fine. Like, he could have been like just thrown in the towel, kind of wrote it out. Would anybody have been like, "Oh, can't believe Bruce Arians didn't get this roused team of 7 wins on the season"? If they were sitting at 3 wins or 4 wins with all the injuries they had, would anybody really be like, "God, Arians just has to go. He's awful"? No, it would be the same thing right now. Like, is it time? Do we need to pull the trigger? Or do they give him one more season to see? That would be the conversation still. They can still get to 500. You and I don't think they're going to do it. We think they're going to win this weekend, and then the Seahawks in Seattle. But it's amazing that we're still having this conversation. Like you said, that it was week 14 or week 15 in the NFL. David Johnson since the first half of week 1. Carson Palmer since week. And it's week 15, and we're still talking about playoffs. That's insane to me.
Yeah. But we were talking about the playoffs, but I mean, the fact that they were even alive, it's fantastic. Now, the Cardinals play the Giants this weekend, Christmas Eve at home against the New York Giants.
I'm going to guess that if you want to get your special someone ticket to the Arizona Cardinals New York Giants game on Christmas Eve, get them for close to under $40, because I'm going to guess that nobody wants to go to this game.
That's probably going to be the case. So yeah. So what can we expect against the Giants? I mean, they played actually quite well considering things against the Eagles last week. They came out. The Cardinals say that they're facing a quality team. Of course, they're going to say that. But the Giants have been a mess. What do they do well?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question, Jess. I honestly, I don't know. What do they do well? They're decimated at wide receiver, and their offensive line has been bad. And I wrote about it today, and it was kind of Cardinals fans need to take a hard look at the New York Giants, because when you look at the Giants after that 11 Super Bowl win, they won 9 games the next year, and then they had a little 7-9, 8-8, 7-9, 6-10 run, and then they fired Tom Coughlin, and they got offensive genius, helped Aaron Rodgers, Ben McAdoo, and what I mean. I don't know about what fans are saying to you, but what fans are saying to me, the Cardinals need to get younger, more aggressive, more diverse play caller. Well, that was Ben McAdoo, and they went 11-5. Everything looked fantastic, and then go exit the playoffs in the first round, and then the implosion happens. I mean, and talk about an implosion. And the biggest thing I think you can take from the Giants is eerie is obviously Eli Manning, but you look at the investment they have made on their offensive line. 2 first on the offensive line. That sounds really familiar. Multiple free agent signings. Sounds familiar. And their offensive line is still a mess. Still a mess. And so sometimes it is the coach. Sometimes it is. I mean, you look at the Rams, you look at the Eagles, sometimes it's the coach. At the 49ers, heck, the 49ers with Jimmy Garoppolo even look kind of good, right? So sometimes it is the coach, 100%. Sometimes it's not. And not that Tom Coughlin's the coach of the Jaguars, but he is kind of the architect of that Jaguars team, right? And they're pretty darn good. I mean, they're not as good as the Arizona Cardinals. We saw that on game day, but they're pretty darn good. And when you look at that, and you go, I don't know what they do well. Like, what is their calling card? Their defense hasn't panned out.
No, they're number
Pierre-Paul
32 again. They're last in the league in defense. They're 31st in both the run defense and pass defense. They're 30th in
which is
scored.
And those numbers are really hard to do. Like, you have to be really, really bad in every phase of the defensive game. I mean, think about even all those bad Arizona Cardinals teams. There's only a handful when there were 32 teams in the league. I would bet there's only a handful that had all three categories as 30th or lower in the NFL. I mean, it's really hard to be that bad of a defensive team, and they've invested. I mean, Jason Pierre-Paul, Olivier.
It's both.
It is. and what is their calling card? Well, their calling card is they're an awful football team. I mean, that's just the fact right now. They're an awful football team, devastated by injuries to key players and positions. Sounds familiar, but they didn't have the coaching. They didn't have the morale, and this is all to say, but they didn't have the morale. They didn't have the rah-rah. They didn't have the room to say, hey, we're not going to just fold it up. And they still have Eli. So, not to make fun of poor Eli, but Eli's still Eli, where, he can blacks out. I don't know exactly what happens, but he can still go into a zone where he's, able to make throws and make plays. And you go, holy crap, how did he do that? And he still looks like, one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the NFL. It's just now those zones are very, very few and far between. And so their running game is just abysmal. Really don't scare anybody. Sterling Shepard's a nice number 2. Evan Ingram looks like he could be a difference maker in another year or two at the tight end position. But the running backs are atrocious. Their offensive line, I mean, golly, you're going to see what it looks like with a really bad offensive line on Sunday, because their offensive line is bad. And that's the baffling thing. You look at the defensive line, they've got some great names. Pierre-Paul.
And they've got great names in the secondary too.
Right. And I mean, what's their safety? Landon Collins was an all-pro last year. Janoris Jenkins was a guy that Cardinals fans really wanted. Rogers Cromartie, am I correct on that still? And so, I mean, you look at the names, yeah, like, how are they this bad? And it's just one of those things. Like, this is kind of similar to in his final season with the Cardinals, where they gave up. And that's the biggest difference. Obviously, there's a slight difference because, Eli is still maybe a viable piece. I'm not sure. He's been pretty bad, but you look at it and like this is a game where you look at it and go, man, if they lose to the Giants after wasting all that time beating the Jaguars and the Titans,
well, here's the thing.
Loss.
The Cardinals have to be able to score points. If I wrote this about leading up to the Redskins game. The Cardinals offense has to be able to score on the Redskins, and they couldn't. If they don't score against the Giants, their offense is just lost. Because they should be able to run the ball. Drew Stanton should be able to throw the ball. I mean, to somebody. And they should be able to score a couple of touchdowns. The Giants have given up 40 touchdowns, and that's just 26th in the league. More touchdowns than the Cardinals have been given up. They've given up 19 passing touchdowns. No, that's not true. They've given up 30 passing touchdowns. 30. I mean,
and the Cardinals have thrown. I mean, Palmer threw 9, and then they've thrown 12.
18 total this year.
Oh my God, dude, because they've only thrown 9. I don't want to talk about it. How has Carson Palmer thrown more touchdowns than Gabbert? I mean, it's the same amount, but how has he thrown as many touchdowns as Gabbert and Stanton combined? This is that Gabbert and Stanton faced were. Holy cow, yeah. If they don't score touchdowns in this game, they should just get rid of all their quarterbacks then.
Well, what should happen, though, as I expect it to be, and you expect it to be, they will get their 7th win because they're a 7-win team. They will get their 7th win. They will probably look pretty okay against the Giants. Drew Stanton will do enough. He will complete, I think he completes 55% of his passes instead of just 50. So I think he's going to combine, he'll probably throw 2 touchdowns. Elijah Penny will score 1. And I think they win this game 24-13. It'll look almost like that game score-wise when Stanton started the last time they played the Giants in New York in 2014. But this is the game I expect the Cardinals to win. It will be a nice send-off for Cardinals fans in the home finale, and hopefully a sign of better things to come for 2018.
Right, and I'm with you 100%. I think that even without Kerwin Williams, I think we get a good Elijah Penny game. I mean, I'm not going to be crazy, but I think if you can get 15 carries and 60 yards and maybe a touchdown of Elijah Penny, I think you're going to excited about that. I think Stanton, like you said, it's gonna be one of those games where he's 15 for 28 for 210 yards and 2 touchdowns type thing. I 7-17. I'm with you. But this is a bad football game. Let's just be honest about that. Like, this is not an attractive thing to be doing on Christmas Eve. There's a lot of other things that are going to be pulling attention away from this. And I wasn't joking, guys. There's over 500 tickets available right now on various websites for under $50 a ticket. When I said that nobody wants to go to this game. Like, you want to go see an NFL game, you want to go to a Cardinals game in 2017 and see them win a game. This is the week. I mean, there are it's available. So go out and support the guys one more time because next year the bandwagon's gonna fill back up and for good reason.
And that'll wrap up this edition of the Rise Up Seat Red podcast. We've talked a lot. You've heard what the show is. Thanks for listening. You can find us, if you haven't yet, find us on iTunes or on one of the podcast distributing sites like Stitcher or TuneIn. But if you've got iTunes, subscribe. Well, iTunes, I guess Apple Podcasts is what it's called now. You can find us on Apple Podcasts. Go ahead and subscribe to us. Give us a review. We'd love to have it. We'd love to see you 5 stars. It makes us feel good, and it's good for business overall. You can find us on Facebook and on Twitter. You can find us on RevengeOfTheBirds.com, on CarsWire.com, on Blog Talk Radio, on Audio Boom, all over the place. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Probably no show next week. The next time we talk will probably be our season review because of the holidays. Go Cardinals. Rise up, Sea Red. Cardinals should get that 7th win this weekend.